This video is sponsored by Normandy 1998, 212th Trooper, Sylar 1610, Rune Scribble, Legendary Ray Ray, and Kitsu the Kitsune. Gritting his teeth, Shadow resumes the fight once more, since any time wasted feeling sorry for himself is time his robotic replica can use against him, and right now, time is squarely on its side. Pushing this realization to the back of his mind where so many other dark thoughts already reside, he attempts to open with a feint, charging headlong at the android before using his air shoes to burst upwards, so he can strike with a drop dash and a move highly reminiscent of how Sonic defeated Robotnik back on South Island. However, this is a mistake, as having been programmed with data on this defeat, Metal Shadow has an inbuilt counter for such a tactic, activating a ring spark field, so that as Shadow descends, he is electrocuted and sent crashing to the ground. Though this is not the end of Metal Shadow's onslaught, as before the ultimate lifeform can rise to his feet, his doppelganger appears beside him to deliver a devastating kick to his gut that causes him to grunt in pain. Fortunately, this pain also comes with valuable information, since Metal Shadow used the Time Stone to freeze him in place so it could close the distance between them, when a Chaos Snap would have been truly instantaneous. This suggests that the Doctor has still not figured out how to harness Chaos Energy, which would in turn indicate that Shadow's robotic faker can't either. This comes as something of a grim reassurance, since while he is still deprived of his Chaos abilities, at least they cannot be used against him. But more than that, it means that in spite of Robotnik's bluster, this machine is not truly his equal. Drawing heart from this, Shadow stands and begins fighting once again, though now his focus is on analysis, since all he needs is a flaw and a means to exploit it. Then he'll reduce this disconcerting double to scrap metal. Though this is easier said than done, as Metal Shadow continues to hold the upper hand, using its programmed combat prowess and control over time to maintain its dominance in the fight. However, programming is predictable, and the stone's not the only means of manipulating time on Little Planet, with these two conclusions giving Shadow a potential path to victory, albeit a narrow one fraught with risk. Fortunately, risk is nothing new to Shadow the Hedgehog, as without hesitation, he puts his new plan into motion, turning on his heels and dashing away from his copy as though he were trying to flee. Having been programmed with the desire to prove its superiority over Shadow and establish itself as the true ultimate life form, the black and red robot refuses to allow this flight, activating the Time Stone's power once more so it can give chase and crush him into the dirt. Though, something is different here, as Metal Shadow must use its full speed to reach its organic counterpart before the stone's effects end. An oddity, as up until now Shadow has not been that fast. No matter, since it will simply alter its objective to breaking the hedgehog's legs. Then victory will be assured. Or at least, that is what Metal Shadow thinks. As the moment time resumes and it begins closing in on its template, a cascade of blue sparks start trailing behind him. Then, just before the robot menace can strike, Shadow vanishes. Casting its red optics in a wide sweeping pattern, Metal Shadow attempts to discern where its opponent has gone, though as it will soon learn, this is the wrong question, since it's not a matter of where, but when. Meanwhile, Shadow appears in the far-flung future, though somehow this is even worse than the fate he had seen for Palm Tree Panic, as the sky has been blotted out by an oppressive blanket of greenish-brown smog, while whatever small pieces of nature still exist have been replaced with rusty metal. However, right now Shadow can't afford to feel sorry for this timeline, as he must focus on fulfilling his plan and claiming the Time Stones, since then he will be able to avert this atrocity, along with many others. To this end, he keeps up his run, barely allowing the blue sparkles to fade as he begins turning in a wide arc, while all around him, machinery is replaced with primal nature, and he returns to the ancient past. Though this is not his last stop, with him only staying long enough to pick up an extra bit of speed and complete his rotation, so that as he returns to the present version of Collision Chaos, he is right behind Metal Shadow. Having no way to anticipate this and no indication to warn of his arrival, the killer robot is caught entirely off guard as Shadow slams into it, sending it crashing into the ground, while the Time Stone skips out of its hand. Urgently, the mechanical duplicate attempts to scramble for the stone, though it is already too late, as with the playing field now leveled, Shadow shows why he is the ultimate life form, stomping down on Metal Shadow's head while sneering that the machine is a failure, since even though it was programmed with all his abilities, it has none of his instincts or the adaptability he learned during his decades on the run from Gun. No amount of technical data can replicate the lessons he's learned through loss, pain, and sacrifice. That's why it'll never be anything more than a pale imitation. With this cold remark, Shadow prepares to take the robot offline permanently, way, though employing a desperate ring spark field, Metal Shadow is able to stun its template long enough to make a break for it. Having been programmed with some of the black and red hedgehog's pragmatism, it is aware that he will catch and destroy it if it tries to grab the time stone now. Therefore, the most logical course of action is to abandon the gem and instead focus on calculating a way to beat his disappearing trick, something that it can do best if it reconvenes with Metal Sonic and their master. To this end, Metal Shadow disengages, flying off with the 3 Chaos Emeralds it was able to steal, while down below, Shadow gathers himself and lays claim to the Time Stone. While this is a less than ideal trade, as he is still blocked off from many of his abilities, at least he's taken the first step on his path to save Maria. With this in mind, Shadow begins making his way across Little Planet, though instead of following Metal Shadow or even chasing after Sonic and his duplicate, he zeroes in on the direction of Robotnik, since if the mad scientist is good for one thing, it's knowing where magic gems are hidden. This quickly leads him to another time stone hidden here in Collision Chaos, along with 3 more in Tidal Tempest, Quartz Quadrant, and Wacky Workbench, so that as he sets foot in Stardust Speedway, he has a grand total of 5. Though, surprisingly, he has not seen hide nor mustache hair from Robotnik or his own faker, with this striking him as odd, since it seems strange that at least one of them has not fought him for the stones along the way, with the only impediment to his progress being hordes of badniks that pose no real threat. Nonetheless, he does not stop, as about halfway along the futuristic racetrack, he comes across his penultimate time stone, though he is not alone, as at that moment Sonic also comes sprinting into view. Catching sight of the older hedgehog, Sonic sighs that he's glad to see Shadow before asking if he's seen Metal Sonic and Amy, since he could have sworn the blue bot was trying to lead him here. Having not been looking out for them, Shadow admits that he hasn't, as he pockets the gem and tells his young companion to come with him, since the last bit of Little Planet he hasn't explored is up ahead, so he suspects the final time stone will be there as well, and they'll need to act fast if they want to stop Robotnik from getting it. Crossing his arms, Sonic questions what about Amy, since saving her is way more important than some dumb rock, though still in that determined tone, Shadow retorts that it won't matter soon, since when he uses the time stones to correct the past, Amy will never have been captured. This is what's best for everyone. Feeling that same unease from earlier, the Blue Blur next asks what exactly he means by correct the past, to which Shadow flatly states that once he's gathered all 7 time stones, he's going to travel back in time and prevent the incident that cost the life of someone very important. Showing off some of the insightfulness he's gained from his time with Shadow, Sonic states that he's talking about Maria, right? Just who is she? And why is she more important than Amy, who's in trouble here and now? Not having time to argue with his protege, and certainly not wanting to get into this at the moment, Shadow bluntly orders him to drop it, though this only gets Sonic more fired up, as he zips in front of the other hedgehog and throws his arms wide, proclaiming that he won't. Naturally, this only further aggravates the ultimate life form, who barks at his companion to step aside, though when the rebellious teen refuses, Shadow attempts to push through, since he's not about to let anyone stand in his way now that he's so close, not even Sonic. Even still, he has no desire to hurt the boy, instead just shoving him aside so he can keep going, though from the look of betrayal in his eyes, Sonic doesn't see it that way, nor does he hold back, as when Shadow passes him, he wastes no time retaliating with a homing attack to the back that knocks the black and red hedgehog onto his hands and knees. Coming to a stop in front of him, Sonic once more attempts to convince his companion that Amy should be their priority, though he isn't given much of a chance, as before he can get 2 words out, Shadow grabs him by the arm and hurls him back in the direction he came. Fortunately, the Blue Blur is still in possession of all his emeralds, allowing him to redirect this fall with a Chaos Snap, so that an instant later he comes in for a flying kick on Shadow. Though having anticipated something like this, the ultimate life form is ready, swinging out a kick of his own to match Sonic's foot, while also signaling that he is done running. If the brat wants to fight, so be it. He'll knock him out, then go collect his final time stone in peace. Wanting to end things quickly, Shadow goes in the offensive now, dashing at Sonic while swinging a punch, though once again the younger hedgehog makes use of Chaos Control, evening the playing field and then some, as he slows down time to dodge, before curling into a ball and launching a point-blank spin dash into Shadow's chest. As he had hoped, this staggers the black and red grump, allowing Sonic to strike again, now with Shadow's own signature aerial roundhouse kick to the head, so that the ultimate life form is knocked off his feet. However, while Sonic may have the advantage when it comes to Chaos Control and all the abilities therein, one area he cannot hope to match his mentor in is experience, as without missing a beat, Shadow turns this tumble into a drop dash, rolling along the ground and bowling Sonic over, so that in an instant their fortunes are reversed, with the Blue Blur flat on his back while Shadow stands over him and instructs him to stay down. Though this is Sonic he's speaking to, so it comes as a little surprise when the younger speedster tells him fat chance before attempting another attack, this time a Chaos Snap drop dash similar to the one he used to beat Robotnik. While this would work on most opponents, Shadow is the exception, as having spent 10 years with the boy and taught him how to fight, the black and red hedgehog knows precisely how to counter this, jumping up and performing a homing attack so their spinning forms clash in midair before breaking apart in an apparent stalemate. As the pair of fighters touch down and unfurl back into kneeling positions, Sonic once more demands to know why Shadow's going this far for this Maria person. Who is she to him? Coldly, Shadow retorts that it's not his concern, though proving himself just as hard-headed as his mentor, Sonic snaps back that it very much is, since if Shadow changes the past, then they may never meet. What makes her more important than the time they've spent together? This at last gives Shadow pause, and after taking a deep breath, he gruffly sighs that Sonic and their time together is important to him. That was never in question, but he failed Maria when she needed him most, and he has to make that right, no matter the cost. Hearing the anguish in his companion's voice, Sonic steps closer, not to attack, but to lay a hand on Shadow's shoulder, as he states that if they act quickly, they can avoid failing Amy too. Then, when she's safe, they'll find a way to help Maria, together. Letting out a wry chuckle, Shadow questions when Sonic got so wise, to which the blue blur playfully states that he learned from the best. Then, as he extends a hand, Shadow clasps it and rises to his feet, ready to do what he must. Taking his place at the other hedgehog's side, Sonic grins that he'll race him to the next zone, an offer Shadow is more than happy to accept, as they both take off at just below the speed that would trigger time travel. Fortunately, Stardust Speedway is perfectly equipped for this playful race, with the pair trading the lead back and forth between them as they jump over and roll under obstacles, with them even briefly finding themselves on a road made of vines when their competitiveness gets too much and they accidentally take a short trip to the prehistoric past. Nonetheless, by the time they reach Metallic Madness, they are back in the present once more, though when Sonic catches sight of the grimy green pipes and floor, he quips they must have gone too fast again. As per usual, Shadow does not laugh at his young companion's jokes, though another sneering voice does call this very droll for a rodent, as Robotnik flies into view inside a mechanical pod sporting 4 spinning bladed wings, while on either side hover Metal Sonic and Metal Shadow, the former of whom is still holding on to Amy. In a fierce tone, Sonic demands the Robotnik give her back. Though still sneering, the Doctor mockingly proposes a trade instead, the girl for the 6 time stones they've gathered. After all, he's got the last one right here, and having learned from his defeat on South Island, he let them bring the rest to him rather than the other way around this time. Scowling deeply, Shadow attempts to activate one of the time stones he has, figuring that with his speed, he can grab Amy in the last stone before the time stop ends. However, it seems Robotnik had prepared for this, as by gripping his time stone tight, he is able to make himself immune to their effect, allowing him to glide forward and show off why the egg spinner has wings, as when Shadow attempts to close in, he is able to block his path with the mech and force him to retreat for fear of being slashed by the rotating blades. At this moment, the time stop ends, allowing Sonic, Metal Sonic, and Metal Shadow to act, and seeing their respective allies have already entered the fray, all 3 of them are quick to do likewise, jumping in and clashing, so that soon the blue blur is fighting his mechanical doppelganger while Shadow is locked in a rematch with his own android double. Seeing that the time stones aren't able to give him the edge he needs, Shadow next attempts his time hopping maneuver, slingshotting through the past and future before coming back into the present for a surprise attack. Though unfortunately, Metal Shadow is too smart to fall for the same trap twice, activating a ring spark field as soon as it loses sight of Shadow, so that when he returns to the present, the black and red hedgehog is forced to pull up at the last second to avoid diving headlong into a bug zapper. Meanwhile, Sonic shows just how much Shadow's hand-to-hand combat training has helped him, as he engages Metal Sonic in duel of quick kicks and slick tricks, effortlessly transitioning from spin dashes to strikes and then back again. Though even this is not quite enough to breach the blue bot's steely hide, as Metal Sonic is ruthless in its onslaught, wanting to prove that it is every bit as strong and fast as the real Sonic, so that for every blow it takes, it gives one back that is enhanced by the strength of a machine and the hatred of a being who takes malicious pleasure in inflicting suffering on its loathsome copy's organic body. As a result, neither Sonic nor Shadow are able to break through as the robotic doppelgangers hold them at bay. Though getting a sneaky idea, Sonic yells out to his companion to switch. Understanding exactly what the boy is thinking, Shadow nods, with the 2 hedgehogs briefly crossing over, as the older launches a homing attack at Metal Sonic, while the younger Chaos snaps to slam a kick into Metal Shadow's chrome dome. At once, the difference is obvious, as while the 2 androids were programmed to counter their templates, they were also made to emulate them, resulting in some of the same quirks and flaws copying over to their fighting styles. styles. Having spent the better part of a decade sparring against each other, Shadow and Sonic both know the other's style inside and out, allowing them to capitalize as they exploit weaknesses no one else would have ever noticed, and which the Doctor subsequently would never have patched. Though, speaking of Robotnik, he is not about to stand idly by when it becomes clear the tide is turning against him, as with a grumbled curse about blasted hedgehogs, he activates the egg spinner's whirring wings and descends into the fight. This adds an unexpected element of chaos, as now on top of battling their robotic doubles, Sonic and Shadow must contend with the Doctor's dirty fighting, as he tries to skewer them from behind on the wings of his mech, or zooms towards them just when they're about to finish off one of the androids, so they have to break away and give their foe a chance to recover. Recognizing they won't be able to claim a decisive victory while Robotnik is making this an unfair fight, Shadow throws Metal Sonic into the wall before briefly disengaging to confront the mech directly, dashing over and kicking off one of its bladed wings, while inside the cockpit, the mustachioed madman howls. However, his anger is only temporary, as a moment later a look of unexpected glee crosses Robotnik's face, forcing Shadow to stop his disassembly of the egg spinner and trace the Doctor's eyeline to see what's got him so happy. Even in the chaos of combat, it is not difficult to identify the source, as having recovered from Shadow's throw, Metal Sonic now stands unopposed as it closes in on its one true target, Sonic. Urgently, Shadow attempts to warn the younger hedgehog, but it is already too late, as with his focus occupied by Metal Shadow, he is entirely caught by surprise when Metal Sonic strikes him from behind with a killing blow. At once, time seems to slow for Shadow, though neither Chaos Control nor the Time Stones are in effect, as with a guttural scream he runs to Sonic, all other considerations forgotten. Thanks to his super speed, he is able to catch the boy before he hits the ground, while instinctively activating his 6 Time Stones, so that at least for a moment they are not under attack. Cradling Sonic in his arms, Shadow firmly urges him to be strong, promising that he'll be alright, though seeing old fear and grief cracking through the mask of stoicism, Sonic shakes his head. Then, with the last of his strength, he pulls out one of his Chaos Emeralds and lays it in Shadow's hand, before it and he go limp. At that moment, time resumes, with the 2 androids and Robotnik all closing in on Shadow as the last enemy left. However, just before they can strike, he vanishes in a flash, reappearing a small distance away and laying Sonic's body safely on the ground. Then, without a word, he Chaos Snaps again, this time appearing beside Amy, as he takes a hold of her and teleports her to Sonic's side. By now, the 2 robots have begun zooming towards this spot too, though refusing to allow them to desecrate Sonic's body any further, or to harm the one he risked himself to rescue. Shadow strikes first, delivering a single brutal kick to his own doppelganger that causes its visor to crack, before fluidly turning this into a homing attack that downs Metal Sonic as well. Now all that remains is Dr. Robotnik himself, and showing him no more mercy than he had his machines, Shadow Chaos snaps to the egg spinner and slams his fist through the windshield. Seeing the very immediate danger he's in, Robotnik tries to bluster and beg for forgiveness, though in contrast, Shadow is entirely taciturn, grabbing him by the shirt front and tossing him out onto the ground to lie beside his creations. Only one thing matters to him now, and as he pulls the final time stone from among the broken glass lining the cockpit, he snarls 2 words: never again. Suddenly, the 7 time stones begin to float around Shadow, each of them now emitting a bright glow. Through her sobs, Amy asks what Shadow plans to do, though the black and red hedgehog does not answer, simply closing his eyes as a blinding flash fills the area, and history is rewritten. When the light dies down, nothing seems to have changed, except the stones have lost all their color, becoming lifeless and grey, as they all fly off in different directions to recharge for another year. From his prone position on the floor, Robotnik cackles that the rumours of their power must have been a lie, while from a small distance away, another voice quips that he hates to agree with Robotnik, but it really does seem like they're a bust. Looking in the direction of the speaker, everyone bar Shadow is shocked to see Sonic alive and uninjured, with that all too familiar cocky smirk on his face once again. Amy in particular is stunned at the sight of the blue blur beside her, as she distinctly remembers his fall, though as the seconds pass and the new timeline begins setting in, these memories fade, leaving the girl with a sense of confusion as to why she feels so much grief and relief all of a sudden. However, one person who does not feel any relief is Robotnik, as with his egg spinner in ruins, his robots in need of critical repairs, and the power of Little Planet proving to be a myth, he and his androids reluctantly retreat, vowing that they'll get those hedgehogs. Meanwhile, in Shadow's hand, the Chaos Emerald Sonic gave him fades from existence, as in this timeline it never left the boy's possession, with this coming as a painful reminder that in spite of defeating Robotnik, Metal Shadow still made off with the 3 Chaos Emeralds it took during the earlier fight with Shadow. Cursing this, the Ultimate Lifeform vows to get them back next time they meet, though Sonic laughingly asks what he's talking about, teasing that Shadow must be getting old, since while he was trashing Baldy's mech, Sonic kicked those 2 fakers' butts and took the emeralds back, remember? To prove this point, he then tosses them back to Shadow, who nods his appreciation and mutters that he must be misremembering, something almost like a smile playing at the edges of his lips as he meets his companion's eyes. Unfortunately, this reunion is somewhat cut short as Amy yells at the guys that it's time to go, since with Robotnik no longer keeping Little Planet tethered to Earth, it's going to return to space with them on it if they don't move quickly. Smirking confidently as he takes her hand and dashes off, Sonic grins that Quick is his middle name. While keeping pace with ease, Shadow retorts that he thought it was Maurice. Grumbling that he never should have told the other hedgehog that, Sonic falls in step with Shadow once more, with the trio quickly reaching the chain connecting the worlds and running down it as all around them Robotnik's mechanization collapses, reverting Little Planet back to its natural beauty. When they are finally free of the world's atmosphere and the risk of being flung through time, the pair of speedsters hold nothing back, racing to the mesa overlooking Never Lake, while up above Little Planet ascends, proving they quite literally did not have a second to spare. Though, before it goes, it does give one last gift to the heroes who saved it, leaving behind a trail of stars that form into the faces of Sonic, Shadow, and Amy. Letting out a squeal of delight, the pink hedgehog beams that it's so pretty, and that she hopes she'll get a chance to see it again next year. Though locking eyes, Shadow and Sonic agree that they can't stay, since with Robotnik on the loose and one more Chaos Emerald still out there, their journey isn't over. At this news, Amy's ears droop, as she is sad to see them go, though refusing to drag them down, she forces a smile and bangs her hammer on the ground, promising that she's going to keep training to be strong like them, so next time they meet, it'll be her saving them. Nodding stoically, Shadow encourages her to work hard, while Sonic winks that he'll see her around. Then, with these words of parting, they take off, running in the direction they saw Robotnik flee in. However, this will not be a silent trip, as when they're alone, Sonic's demeanor shifts slightly, as he half asks, half states that the time stones weren't really duds, were they? Keeping his eyes on the horizon, Shadow nods, though this only elicits a further comment, as the blue blur next states that he didn't use them to save Maria, did he? Once more, Shadow nods. While looking over his companion, Sonic asks why not, since he knows that was important to him. This time, Shadow does speak, simply replying that he saved someone equally important, with this being all that is said on the matter, as the 2 hedgehogs pick up speed and race towards their next adventure. And that's where we'll leave things for now. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts, suggestions, or screams of rage in the comments below.